Hello, this is Freethought Forum, a program produced and funded by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Ralph Eisler.
And I am no longer Catholic Dan. This is a show that promotes rational thinking rooted in scholarship and science and free of supernatural beliefs.
This is a call-in show. However, we only have one phone line, so if you can't get through, we invite you to tweet us at FFTVKNOX. While we go over a few announcements, we invite you to start calling in now at the number on the screen. Get a pen and paper, and we'll give you our email address later in the show.
The Atheist Society of Knoxville frequently has a fun meetup at a bar or eatery. Tonight's meetup is at Barley's in the Old City, starting around 5:30. Look for the silver-jacketed copy of The God Delusion standing upright on the table. And as Matt Dillahunty at the Atheist Experience says, everyone is welcome to our happy hour for food, drink, and conversation. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't.
Okay. Well, the Rationalists of Tennessee have several regular monthly meetings. First and third Sunday mornings are usually lectures with lively roundtable discussions. The book club meets on the second Sunday, and the reflection group often gets together for a potluck lunch on the fourth Sunday. Visit our websites for additional details, including time and locations.
Our main topic today is why anti-atheist arguments fail. But before we take up this topic, let's look at some items in the news.
Okay, well, if you haven't noticed, there's an ongoing movement by religious zealots in this country to subvert the role of civil law to religious dogmas. This movement has been brought to the foreground by the ACA requirements that business-related health insurance plans provide contraceptive coverage, by recent court decisions validating same-sex marriage, and by controversies about the use of restrooms for transgender people. But one of the people who has been in forefront of this movement for some time is Alabama Chief Justice Roy Moore. In 2003, he was removed from office. That's a Chief Justice being removed from office after refusing a federal court's order to remove a huge granite display of the Ten Commandments from the state judicial building. But Alabama voters elected him to the office again in 2012. Now his term leading the court has been cut short again.
Bravo, Alabama. Well done. Moore forced the debate last year when he issued orders in conflict with the Mobile, Alabama federal judge's ruling that struck down the state's ban on same-sex marriage. Here's what he told NPR at the time. Should I do an Alabama accent here?
Yeah, you can if you want.
If we sit back and let the federal courts intrude their powers into state sovereignty, then we're neglecting everything about which the Constitution stands, Moore said. The result was confusion in marriage license offices throughout Alabama. Some closed down altogether, even after the U.S. Supreme Court affirmed marriage equality. Moore told local judges that they had a ministerial duty not to issue any marriage license contrary to state laws forbidding same-sex marriage.
Yeah, I like that ministerial duty bit, right?
Right. I don't know if
little doubt about separation of church and state in this. Anyhow, Alabama's Court of the Judiciary has again suspended Moore for the rest of his term in office, saying that Alabama Chief Justice violated judicial ethics when he ordered judges not to respect the U.S. Supreme Court's landmark ruling on same-sex marriage. The order also requires Moore to pay the cost of the proceedings against him and stipulates that he will not be paid for the remainder of his 6-year term. Alabama's next election is scheduled for 2018. But after his term, though, Moore's age will disqualify him for running for judge, notes Alabama Public Radio, which adds that Moore could file an appeal to send his case to the state Supreme Court.
The judgment against Moore was unanimous, but the 9-member court also noted that the decision is based on a review of Moore's behavior and decisions, not on the justice's views of the Supreme Court's June 2015 ruling that same-sex couples have the right to marry. Contrary to Alabama's law, adopted in 2016, that had reserved marriage for heterosexual couples only, saying that some members of this court did not personally agree with the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling, the judge wrote. This court simply does not have the authority to re-examine them issues.
Yeah, I should point out that even though Moore can no longer run for Supreme Court justice, he can run for governor. And if he's been elected twice in Alabama, he could very well win the governorship. There's no limit on age.
Well, not moving to Alabama. It's official.
Okay. Well, today we have to mention that atheists have been celebrating the 10-year anniversary of the release of Richard Dawkins' bestseller, The God Delusion, credited for leading countless of people away from faith. I don't know if it led countless of people away from the faith, but I think it encouraged a lot of people who maybe were a little unsure about their feelings or a little unsure about coming out to be a little more vocal.
Well, did you read it?
There. Yes.
You read it?
Yes.
I mean, I can't read. That's a known stat, but I listened to it on audiobook.
Okay.
It was very good.
I'll read it to you sometime if you'd like, or parts of it anyhow.
That'd be great. That'd be great. I usually have my mom read me a bedtime story, and I handed her that, and she was like, okay, maybe your time to move out of the house.
Okay. Well, anyhow, it was 10 years ago last Sunday when God Delusion was first published in the United Kingdom. And the book went on to sell more than 3 million copies. And anecdotally, led countless people away from the religions of their youth. In fact, you could argue that God Delusion has created more atheists than any other book in history, with the sole exception of the Bible, of course.
So The God Delusion was written 10 years ago by Richard Dawkins. Dawkins is one of what we call, well, I don't know if you call it, but has been referred to as one of the new horsemen.
One of the new atheists.
The new atheists, right.
One of the four horsemen.
One of the four horsemen of the new atheists. And it is Dan Dennett, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris,
and
Christopher Hitchens. I've read stuff by all four of those guys, but Dawkins' stuff is probably the most controversial, maybe, would you say? Or it's at least the most in your face. It sort of rubs people the wrong way.
Hitchens is pretty much in your face, I think. He could be pretty acerbic when he wanted to. I like Dawkins because I'm a scientist and he's a scientist, and I think we tend to view things in the same way a lot of times. Harris is a scientist, but he's a cognitive scientist or neuroscience, something like that. And Dennett is a philosopher, and so I'm not quite synced with the way they think all the time. But it's not that I disagree with anything they've said. It's just, how you can relate to different people.
Now, Christopher Hitchens is dead, correct?
He's dead, yes.
But Richard Dawkins is still alive.
Yes, he suffered a stroke earlier this year, but it kept him from making the Reason rally, giving a talk. But he seems to be recovering well from that now.
Well, what if we were to pose our question today to any one of those four members of the new atheists, the four horsemen? What if we were to pose to them, where is God? What do you think they might have for an answer for us? That's what we're going to get into, right?
We're not really going to get quite into that, but it does bear on these things because people talk about God all the time as being, somewhere, but they never tell you where. And the pat answer is probably, everywhere. But is that everywhere in Knoxville? Everywhere in Tennessee? Everywhere in the world?
I think specifically just Alabama, from what I read earlier.
It seems to spend a lot of time in Alabama in any case.
Sure.
Anyhow, we'll get on to our main topic today, why anti-atheist arguments fail. And this is taken to a large extent from a blog by a fellow named Eric Hyde, which he titled The 10 Most Common Atheist Arguments and Why They Fail.
So you're telling me that there's arguments against being an atheist. Is that what we're about to get into?
That's what I'm telling you. There are arguments against atheism.
One would say that that's a double negative, an anti-atheist. So the obvious terminology would mean that you're a pro-religious argument. Is that
pro-theist?
Pro-theist.
Pro-theist.
Okay,
not
but this
prosthetic. Pro-theist.
But this is a slightly different, because it's not arguing for the religion, it's arguing against the anti-religion. Okay.
Exactly. Okay. So that's the way I phrased it, and we just have to live with it now. Okay. Anyhow, Mr. Hyde has several talking points, and his first one is that the simplest and most widely accepted argument for an atheist is there is no evidence for God's existence. Now, Mr. Hyde is first poised to set up a straw man by saying atheists expect God to be a physical being, whereas Christians always maintain God as a spirit, and so demand spirit material proof of his existence is nonsensical.
So you said he sets up a straw man, meaning a straw man is a logical fallacy.
Straw man is a logical fallacy. He sets it up by saying that atheists demand to have be able to shake hands with God or something like that, to be able to measure him, weigh him, what have you, okay?
So a straw man argument would be purporting someone else's argument, not really what you're trying to argue at all. Is that sort of what it is? It's sort of...
The straw man argument is a deflection from what the real problem is, to setting up a false problem and then being able to show that it logically doesn't hold, or
right.
that it's not reasonable to hold the position. And so that's what I say. Most atheists would be happy to say the God's a supernatural entity, spirit like that, what have you. That's fine, okay. So most are perfectly willing to do that. However, Mr. Hyde doesn't tell you what a spirit is. Now, I can tell you what a spirit is not. It's not something that has that's made out of atoms the way we know it. It's not made out of space or time or something, but I can't tell you what it is. And I don't think Mr. Hyde can tell you what it is either.
So he's using a cop-out term of a spirit.
Right, right.
Meaning anything or nothing or everything.
So anyhow, after Mr. Hyde knocks that straw man down, he changes tactics and acknowledges that many atheists will protest, saying that not God himself, but his activity should be detectable in the physical world, which is true. I mean, we can assume we have this thing that's spirit, it's not material, but if you want to say that it really exists, then it has to be able to interact with the material world somehow. Otherwise, who cares? It has no influence on us or anybody else, right?
Right. So we should be able to, in some sort of quantifiable way, see or measure or
be able
recognize.
to see examples of this spirit's hands, you know,
right.
In nature or in history, something of that sort. And I would maintain that there actually is absolutely no evidence anywhere. Now, what people used to do, of course, is say that anything that they didn't understand was caused by God, okay? We had couple sessions of Black Plague in the 5th century, the 13th century, and...
Those were Satan, right?
Well, they could be Satan, or people didn't understand them. A lot of people thought it was God's punishment because
Makes
they
sense.
weren't, you know, they weren't religious enough.
Has to be.
And
oh, wait, maybe it was just a bunch of poisoned rats.
Nobody ever said that in the 13th century. But that's the point. People want cause and effect, and if you see an effect, you want to set up a cause. And so God, by default, became the agent by which all these things happen, and the agent why storms happen, tsunamis.
But those are God. Tsunamis have to be God. Like, there's no way a tidal wave just comes up and just like that. It has to be because we allowed gay marriage in Alabama, right? That's why we have tidal waves.
I think there were tidal waves before that, actually. So it must have been something before. But maybe they're going to get worse. Okay.
Okay. All right. If you say so.
Anyhow, Mr. Hyde gives no examples of such interaction or activity of this God in the world at all. Rather, he refers the reader to a book called Evidence for God, which is an anthology co-edited by one William Dembski. Now, are you familiar with Dembski?
I am not.
Okay.
But I have heard that I haven't read his stuff, but is he something with intelligent design?
Right. So you know this book is going to be full of little essays on intelligent design. Apparently has, little articles by about 50 people, theologians, philosophers, probably some people who consider themselves scientists like Michael Bay.
Michael Bay, the movie guy?
No, Michael Bay, the intelligent design guy.
Oh, didn't he make Transformers too?
Michael Bay.
Yeah,
sorry,
pretty sure.
I'm not getting this illusion.
I'm just messing with you, Ralph.
Anyhow, the intelligent design movement is, I don't know, you haven't heard much about it lately, right?
It was pretty
Pretty
popular
well.
when President
Right.
Bush was around, right?
Well, it really got a jump start around 1996 when Behe published his book on, and it was started before by a fellow named Philip Johnson, who went through a crisis in his 50s because his wife left him, and like all good lawyers looking for cause and effect, he decided it had to be the feminist movement, which was caused by the theory of evolution.
So the feminist movement.
Yeah, she left them because she wanted more independence.
Right. So women wanted their freedom, thus intelligent design.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, something like that. That's the way it came along. And then when Bay wrote his book on Darwin's Black Box, that kick-started. But that's 22 years ago now, and it's one of those things like a nova that flashes up and then it dies back down, and you haven't heard much about it lately. And if you remember Dembski, he was a guy who he tried to apply some mathematics to understanding it. He had this theory called, what was it called? Specified complex. I can't. It escapes me right now. Okay, complex specified information. That's what it was. And he had this big filter where he'd take a phenomena and say, well, is it natural that is caused by, can I relate it to natural law? And if it says no, is it random? No. And then if it was neither of those, then it had to be designed, presumably by some designer. Well, of course, they left out the path where you both have random interactions and natural forces in play, which is what the theory of evolution does. He also didn't calculate probabilities very well. I mean, if you assume that you have a certain type of protein and calculate the probability of that happening as probability of each one of these atoms getting together to make this protein molecule as if they were independent probability. And that gives you an enormous number that just can't possibly happen. Anyhow, he's not very reputable. So we still have this problem by which a spiritual immaterial being interacts with the material world. Nobody's ever said anything about how that can happen.
Well, doesn't it just like get in your brain, like tell you to do stuff?
Getting in your brain, okay?
Right.
But your brain is a material object, right?
But not your mind.
Your mind is a material object. If you have, your mind depends on the brain working. If your brain doesn't work, you have no mind. I mean, do you remember Terry Schiavo?
I do remember Terry Schiavo.
And what happened? Well, she lived in a coma there for years and years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
well, she lived. She was alive. She was a.
And when they finally pulled the plug, her brain had shrunk to about a third of its size, right?
Really? Okay.
And in all that period in coma, she had no mind, so to speak. Okay.
So her brain had completely atrophied down to very, very small.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. But anyhow, getting back to this question of spirit, I think most theists don't really think of their God as a spirit. They really think of it as a superhuman entity that sees and hears everything they do. Now, they might not tell you that, but I think subconsciously that's the way they view it, because you used to go to church,
I
right?
did.
I used to go to church.
That was a waste of time, yeah.
Did you ever say the Lord's Prayer in church?
I think we were forced to every single time.
I think you're forced to every single time. I went to...
Not only that, we held hands, because that held the spirit in.
Oh, okay.
That was a trick.
Yeah, I used to do that too, but I went to a funeral service a couple months ago, and it was in a church, and it was a regular church service, and it just sort of brought me up short when people started to say Lord's Prayer, because it's something I hadn't heard for so long, you know. But in any case, the point is, if you say the Lord's Prayer, it's directed towards a person, right? Our Father.
Mm-hmm.
A Father is a person.
Mm-hmm.
Father.
Who art in heaven.
He lives in a specific place,
Correct.
right? So where is God?
Heaven.
God's heaven. But now I have to have somebody tell me where heaven is, okay? So anyhow...
the third line is not where it is. It's hallowed be thy name. So it doesn't. The
I
prayer falls
know.
short.
I know. Anyhow, and so, and they also they assign human qualities to this God:
Sure.
love, hate, jealousy, but those are traits of human beings, right? And they require a mind to have those. I mean, a reflective mind to have those. Now, if this God is all spirit, it certainly doesn't have a brain, doesn't have a mind. That makes no sense. And so how can it possibly love or hate or be jealous of something? I mean, God himself says he's jealous, right?
I mean, the God of the
I
Catholic Bible certainly is very vengeful and jealous, and lots of things.
I, like God, am a jealous God, publishing the iniquities of the father unto the third and fourth generation.
Right.
Right, type of thing. So these, if you're going to have this God to be entirely a spirit, you can't assign him human attributes, that is, human emotions, etc. It just doesn't work. So that's why this anti-atheist argument simply fails. It doesn't, it's just not worth it. Okay, anyhow, then Hyde goes on. I know I'm picking on this guy. We have some other stuff, but he's such a source.
Keep picking on him. If you'd like to join in on the conversation and pick on Mr. Hyde as well, call us at 865-215-2288. Maybe you can answer our question. Where is God? We've been looking for the last 25 minutes. Maybe he's over here.
Nah,
no, it's just there's some
I didn't
thing.
think he came in today.
No.
However, Mr. Hyde goes on to say, however, if what atheists mean is something like there is no logical evidence of God's existence, then the straw man becomes a brick wall. That is the atheist straw man. He was putting it on us and building up a straw man. He says the logical arguments for God are vast and time-tested against some of the greatest minds of all time, working tirelessly against them. They are well-known arguments and can easily be found online or in print. But he doesn't mention
where or what.
Any of what they are.
No specifics.
What this mostly refers to is the nonsensical ontological argument for God. Don't know how many people are familiar with that, but ontological argument is a purely logical argument for God. It was first proposed by this monk Anselm in, 12th century, 11th century, something like that, and has been recast in various forms down through the centuries because nobody can ever get it quite right. There always seems to be something wrong with it. We'll talk about it in a minute, but there's a fellow who's a blogger named Chris Hallquist, who's sort of a philosopher type of guy. I don't know exactly what he does.
Is he a Christian apologist?
No.
Oh.
He's anti-apologist.
Oh, okay.
And his comment about the ontological argument, he says, I'll have to read this. The ontological argument is the epitome of an argument that essentially no one actually uses for the existence of God, but is instead used to show how sophisticated religious thought is supposed to be. These days, it's even hard to find a philosopher who thinks the argument is good for anything except tormenting philosophy students. And so that pretty much sets it up. But here again, Mr. Hyde, he says this is time tested against all the greatest minds, et cetera, and has stood the test of time. That's absolute nonsense. I mean, if you read the people who are into this, some of the theologians or philosophers of religion, why they spend a lot of time dwelling on it, far more than it ever deserves, okay? Anyhow, there's a fellow named Alvin Plantinga, who was at Notre Dame. He was professor at Notre Dame, philosopher, and he was probably one of the best-known Christian apologists that we've had recently. He's now retired. He's still around so far as I know, but he gave a version of the ontological argument, which goes as follows.
Okay.
Now, you might have to listen closely to this, okay? 1, A being has maximal excellence in a given possible world W if and only if is it omnipotent, omniscient, and wholly good in W. And 2, a being has maximal greatness if it has maximal excellence in every possible world. 3, it is possible that there is a being that has maximal greatness. That's the premise. Therefore, possibly, it is necessarily true that an omniscient, omnipotent, and perfectly good being exists. That necessarily is an important word. It had, for this argument, it has to be true. Okay. Therefore, by axiom S5, we'll talk about this right now, but 5 on his line. Therefore, by axiom S5, it is necessarily true that an omniscient, omnipotent, and perfectly good being exists. Therefore, an omniscient, omnipotent, and perfectly good being does exist.
I'm lost. I've read the ontological argument before, and I'm trying to get caught up here with so what this is. So you're saying because it's possible, therefore it is?
It has to do, yes, with the possibility of, in some possible worlds, philosophers talk about possible worlds,
right.
Okay? And if it possibly exists in some possible world, then it necessarily exists.
Okay.
Okay. And then it all goes down here and follows. But this is a lot of crap, as Hallquist says. Nobody believes this except the torture students, okay?
It's a thought experiment, basically.
And in fact, when you get done with this Planting's argument, after all the centuries, down there, he couldn't take the ones before because they didn't stand up very well. So this is his. But he's the most famous present proponent of the modal ontological argument. He even says it doesn't prove the existence of God. He says that it only shows that it's reasonable to believe in God. But this is probably wrong too, if you really get right down to it. So that's the kind of stuff that these guys like Hyde, these apologists, come out and they put out, and that tell you that, oh my gosh, down through history we've had all these great minds thinking of these things, and so there you are.
So let me try to summarize this. The ontological argument is that because a lot of smart people thought that there was a God way back and it's continued on, then there must be?
No, that's not it. It starts out that Anselm started out by saying, basically, is there something that's greater than anything that you can think of? That is what's called God, okay? And it goes on from that. And a fellow named Duns Scotus, he modifies it, a few centuries later or something, and then people come down. But I really wouldn't worry about it because
I'm not worried about it.
I'm just putting in. You can see the type of language that gets used and why Hallquist says philosophers only use it to torture their students.
It's sort of, it's intentionally confusing almost. Its vagaries are everywhere, and it doesn't solidly make any sort of.
No, because you can basically prove anything you want with it. For instance. Here's one, Richard Dawkins in The God Delusion gives you an example. This may help. Okay? Dawkins says, I once piqued the gathering of theologians and philosophers by adapting the ontological argument to prove that pigs can fly. They felt the need to resort to modal logic to prove I was wrong. Now, philosophers may be a bit annoyed with his story, as it implies that modal logic is just obviously ridiculous. However, while modal logic may or may not be ridiculous, the modal ontological argument is even more vulnerable to parody than Anselm's argument. Anselm didn't use this modal logic, which is what refers to the S5. For example, it's possible that it's a necessary truth that pigs can fly. It is possible.
Okay, I got you.
If it is possible that something is a necessary truth, it is a necessary truth.
I got you.
Okay. Therefore, it's a necessary truth that pigs can fly. If something's a necessary truth, then it's true. Therefore, pigs can fly.
There you have it, folks. Pigs can fly. God's real. We were wrong. I apologize.
So, again,
I'll show myself out.
This is the type of argument Mr. Hyde describes as fast and time-tested I think you should read a little more wider in philosophy.
I see.
Okay.
I totally get it now with that example from Dawkins.
Yeah.
And I see how, yes, you can just sort of state something in such a way that you can prove anything. So there you go.
Yeah.
If you'd like to join in on the hot topics here, 865-215-2288. We are here every Tuesday from 5 to 6 p.m. Free Thought Hour.
Yeah. Or come down and join us at Barley's after the show is over.
Yep.
Have a pizza or a sandwich, something like that, and some good conversation. And as I say, we can argue anything you want. Just don't punch.
Yeah, don't punch.
Whatever.
And Ralph just showed you he can prove anything, so. Are you a real scientist or just a TV scientist?
Well, I mean, if you take this ontological, argument that's presented there, you can use to prove anything. Yeah.
So that brings us to another
think
question
sort of a
here.
dead horse. Well, yeah, I'd like to get away from Mr. Hyde a little
Okay.
bit and talk on this one. You know, there are a couple movies that have come out recently that, well, God is Not Dead,
I've heard about these fantastic flicks.
and God is Not Dead too.
I've heard about, yes, these Kevin Sorbo movies.
Yes. And so just wanted to make the comment that, of course, these movies are anti-atheist. Kevin Sorbo plays some sort of a college professor, you know, atheist
Right.
college professor, and the bright young student ends
course.
up, you know, just giving it to him right in the gut there.
Sure.
Anyhow, it brings up the question then, is God dead? And of course, the premise of the movie is no. But I agree with that. I say God is not dead. Now, not necessarily because of what the movie says, but I say he's not dead because he was never alive. And you have to understand how we distinguish living things, that is, animated things, from non-living things, okay? So we have a rock, which we wouldn't say was living.
No.
Okay. But we have a person, or we have animals or trees that we say are living. Okay? They're animate. They're living things. They're not inanimate, like a rock. So what's the distinguishing feature of something that's living? Well, they take in sources of food, and by chemical processes, they use those to create energy that keeps them above thermal equilibrium with their surroundings. The rock is at thermal equilibrium with surroundings.
The rock is at thermal equilibrium with the surroundings, meaning its temperature is the same as
It's the same.
incandescent air or whatever.
Right. And let me tell you, if your temperature ever gets down to thermal equilibrium with the surroundings, you're dead.
Okay.
That's the definition of
I'll
being
keep a sweater on.
That's the definition of being dead.
Okay.
Okay. So, a God that's a spirit has no mechanism to take in stuff, food. He has no internal mechanism to create energy out of it.
Okay.
And so he is not and cannot, by any definition of what we call alive, be alive. Now you may want to change the definition somehow, but God is not dead, just not because he is living, but
Okay.
because he never was alive.
Let me challenge you there. Is a virus dead or alive?
A virus is alive only in the sense that it needs a host. It cannot exist by itself.
Okay.
Right? So there is this debate that goes on about whether viruses are alive or not. And they sort of come in between there because they need a host to survive.
So maybe God's a virus? Is he hidden?
I would say so. And anyhow, we have to go to a program break
Sure.
right now. So
In case you're just tuning in, this is Free Thought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Free Thought Forum is funded jointly by them and by individual contributions. Shows are live most every Tuesday from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern on Community Access Television. You can also see it streaming online outside the Knoxville area. Just go to ctvknox.org.
okay, well, this is a call-in show, and we're live today, October 4th, and viewers can call in now to the number on the screen or tweet to us at FFTVKNOX.
The Atheist Society of Knoxville, or ASK, meets 2 times per week. We have evening meetups for fun, food, drink, and conversation. Ask's purpose is to supply a venue for community, camaraderie, and outreach to atheists, agnostics, freethinkers, and other like-minded persons in the East Tennessee area.
Okay, well, can we run our promo?
If you live in or around the Knoxville area and are questioning your religious beliefs or simply believe in one less God than everyone else, well, you're not alone. The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun and friendly group of people just like you that meets twice a week at a bar or restaurant. We meet every Tuesday night following the show at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria for happy hour. You'll find our group either inside or on the patio. Look for Richard Dawkins' silver-jacketed book, The God Delusion, standing upright on the table. On Fridays, we meet at Agave Azul or the Beard and Beer Market. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't. We all question what we believe at one point in our lives. If this is the time for you, come join us for food, drink, conversation, and fun. Do you find stories of talking snakes laughable? Do you prefer the scientific method over supernatural beliefs? Are you concerned about religious leaders and organizations imposing their values and rules on your body, your family, and the rest of our society? Well, take comfort in the fact that you're not alone. The Rationalists of East Tennessee meets weekly for fellowship and provides a forum for people who support skeptical thinking and rational discussion of these and other issues. To find out more information or to find out about our next meeting, visit us on the web at www.rationalist.org.
Okay, well, we're back here with the show. The Rationalists of East Tennessee has Sunday activities involving lively presentations and discussions of subjects topical and timeless. Once a month we get together for a book club. You don't have to have read the book, but of course it helps.
Both the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee help provide a social outlet where you'll find that if you don't believe in God, you are not alone. And before we continue on with our program, I have a special message. This message is for the Emmanuel Christian Church located near Holston Middle School. The FFRF has plain and simply asked you to remove your sign during non-service hours. You've been asked through email, through phone calls, repeatedly. You're in violation of the law. It's as simple as that.
What?
You may have your church sign up during church service hours, and that is it. You can't put a church sign on a public school.
Oh,
You see what I'm saying? And so they've been doing this for the past couple of months, and the FFRF has been asking them politely to remove the sign.
there's the Freedom from Religion Foundation.
Correct. The Freedom from Religion Foundation, which is in Knoxville, and they have asked you, and you haven't done it. So if you'd like to continue in this manner, we will continue to bring it up and make this an issue. And so, simple, take your sign down, we'll let it go. If not, who knows?
Okay. Well, there's another guy I came across last couple of weeks. I often go to the Christian Post on the web. They have a subsection on atheism, and usually they publish stories that they've taken out of other news sources,
Right.
that have been published elsewhere, et cetera. And so I pick up a lot of stuff there that I might have
Cool.
missed at different points. But every once in a while, they have one of their in-house people write a little op-ed piece or something of the sort.
Okay.
And they're usually terrible, absolutely terrible. But I came across this one by a guy named Dan Delzell, and this guy is almost frothing at the mouth here. And okay, well, it seems like we have a caller. Hello, caller. You've reached Freethought Forum. Do you have a question for us or a comment?
Well, this is Faithless Forest. I've been watching the show.
Hello, Faith.
I would share with you and viewers, listeners, viewers, an interaction I once had that's kind of like, someone, relative to your topic.
Yeah.
So I get this email one day, and it was a photograph of an albino peacock.
Mm-hmm.
A peacock is the male of the species. I guess then the female is called the peahen. And the males, have this elaborate tail, usually very colorful, and on the feathers there are these structures that almost look like lots of eyes and
Yeah.
stuff. But an albino peacock doesn't have any pigments. And so It's all white, and it's a beautiful thing to look at. I looked at it and thought of it as a living snowflake. In fact, maybe there was some references to that. Maybe that's not an original idea on my part. But of course, what someone had to write about it was, only God can make something this beautiful. And it was one of these things that was sent out on a mass email, and I did a reply all, and I said that, well, no, I don't think a God made this at all, and in fact, actually, there's a very good explanation of what made it, and that is that the albino nature of it is actually just a failure of a protein to encode for pigments, and for which there's a very natural explanation, and that in actuality, if this peacock is living in the wild, he's now very kind of vulnerable, because being that white, he really stands out and is, very vulnerable to predators. But much more important is that whether you're an albino peacock or a regularly pigmented peacock, you look beautiful to human eyes, and you look beautiful to peahen eyes. Peahens are selecting that when they select mates. And so there's an insight about the aesthetic appreciation of not even another mammal, but, a bird species, that they see something that let's call it attractive, and I'm going to say beautiful, in a peacock that we see, or at least we can appreciate it. And that's far more profound and interesting than to say, oh, God made it for our pleasure, or something like that.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Darwin went into a lot of discussions about sexual selection, and I think most evolutionary biologists agree that it's a fairly strong force.
Right. So the rarity of the albino peacock is what makes it beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the point is that there's one more point. I'm trying to emphasize one more thing, and that is that there is something similar about our ability to perceive the world around us as beautiful that even birds share with us. As different as their brains are, they appreciate some things that are beautiful just like we do, and they're the same, meaning, we react positively to the same thing that a peahen does. And, when someone misattributes that to their imaginary sky friend, they're missing an opportunity to understand something about our fellow living creatures. Well, it seems a shame to me.
Yeah, well, obviously, peacocks were not created to attract human beings. They were created to attract peahens. So,
but there's something that's beautiful about the symmetry,
yes, but
and the variegations of color, and let's call it visual texture.
Yeah, you're getting into the area of aesthetics, and peahens
have a brain that appreciate aesthetics too.
Well, maybe not in the same way we do. I mean, I can understand why the peahen appreciates. I'm not sure why I do. I do, but I'm not sure why. I mean, if it's there for sexual attraction, I don't have any sexual attraction to peacocks, but I sure appreciate their beauty.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah. And but what that means is that there's aspects of beauty that
are deeper than just
general.
Humans.
Yeah,
they're general.
Right.
Yeah.
All righty. Well, and so I guess in answer to that question, where's God? I guess it's in the brain of the peahen. If what we're thinking is God made peacocks, so God is in the brain of the peahen.
There you go.
All right. Well, I hope you get some more callers.
Okay.
Let
Thanks.
me say bye now.
Thanks for calling in for us.
865-215-2288. I think the point he was just trying to make was that if birds can find other birds beautiful, right? We can find other things beautiful. It doesn't necessarily mean that it was created by an intelligent designer.
I really doubt that the birds find other birds beautiful in the same sense that we may find them. I mean, there's certainly an attraction there, but you know, they don't sit down and reason about whether other birds are beautiful or not. They have an attraction or non-attraction, and somehow they are programmed where they try to pick out the healthiest males, which may be the ones that are the most colorful or have the biggest tails, so far as peacocks go, etc. So, yeah, I don't know. Okay, anyhow, I'd like to talk about this one more question here before we get up, because this is one that comes up an awful lot. And as I say, this came out of a article by some guy named Dan Dalzell on Christian Post. He says, atheists try not to think about the question why there is something rather than nothing. Well, first of all, I disagree with that entirely.
I think about that all the time.
I think about it all the time, quite frankly. He says atheism has no rational answer to this fundamental question, and even considering the question has the potential to chip away at the beliefs of an atheist. Well, this is absolute rot, okay?
Calm down, Ralph.
Well, we have physicists, we have astrophysicists, we have cosmologists who think about this all the time, about why there is something rather than nothing in the universe. And like many other things, it may have been somewhat slow coming, but we are putting together a pretty good picture of how the universe came into existence. Okay?
Right.
Now, he doesn't define what something is, and he doesn't define what nothing is. Okay? Now, maybe I'm being picky here, but if you say there is something, it really incumbent upon you to define what that something is at some point, I think. So, what would we consider to be something?
Wouldn't you say just everything? Just this table, this microphone, this paper? That's something?
That's something, okay.
I mean, everything, isn't that it?
And all the stars in the universe, planets and everything?
Yeah, I guess so. That's all something.
Okay. Well, let's look at this a little more.
Okay.
From a physicist's point of view, they would like to consider the total mass energy content of the universe.
Right.
Okay? Because, as we all know, Einstein showed that mass and energy are equivalent.
Correct.
So, a probably more refined definition of something would be the total mass energy of the universe.
Okay,
So
I'm with you.
All those things we talk about here, tables, chairs,
I think I know where you're going. Okay.
stars, etc. We know about how many of those, and I'm going to talk about something called stuff. And those make up about 0.5% of the stuff in the universe.
Slow down, Einstein. Stuff?
Stuff.
Dumb it down for us.
Just go with it. There's about 10 times as much. That's ordinary matter. And there's about 10 times as much of that in intergalactic space.
Okay.
Intergalactic space is huge. So if you say God is everywhere, he is really big.
Okay.
And not only that, he's not constant, but he has to be growing because space is expanding. Anyhow, that's off the table. But anyhow, so we have ordinary matter making up about 5% of what are called stuff in the universe.
Okay.
There's another 25% that's made up of what's called dark matter.
Okay.
We don't really understand what it is, but we can see its effect on the gravitational effect on rotation and light bending, etc. And about 70% of the stuff is what's called dark energy, which is energy that's associated with space itself. Again, we don't know very much what it is.
Okay.
Okay. But we can measure it because it's what makes space expand. Sorry. Now, that's a lot of stuff.
That's a lot of stuff.
But we have to take one more thing into account,
right.
And that one more thing is the gravitational potential energy between all the objects in the universe, all the stars, et cetera, et cetera. Gravitation is universal. But that goes into the equation or into the sum as a negative number.
Okay. Okay.
And so far as anyone can tell, it just balances out all the stuff.
Okay.
And so the total mass energy of the content of the universe is 0, so far as one can tell. Now, if we want to limit our talk about something to whether it's stars or the static chair or whatever, then we know that there are physical processes like gravity that are responsible for forming stars. The earliest stars had only hydrogen and helium. When they collapsed in supernovas, they created all the other elements we have, like the material for this table, the iron that we use to build chairs with, or what have you. Those were all created in stars. They didn't exist at the beginning of the universe. And so those are brought together by natural forces, all right? The only question that really, I think, remains to be answered, and it's a big question, is how did the first life arise?
Okay.
Now, you can retreat and say, well, you don't understand that, so it has to be God, but there are so many other things that had to be God in the past.
Right.
That science has finally solved the answer to, or at least give good reasons for believing that scientific answers are true, that we can't say whether science will or will not, but it has a much better track record than God does in explaining any natural phenomenon.
Well, as far as I can tell, every time we have a question on the table and we flip over the answer, it's never God. It's never, oh, well, God did the tornado, but not the hurricanes.
It depends on whether you're in the rationalist group.
Well, sure, but I'm saying, like, as far as I can tell, religion and spirituality are simply science we haven't figured out yet.
Well,
like you were saying in the beginning of life.
Most gods were created to explain natural phenomena.
Right.
And strangely enough, I mean, we understand what causes hurricanes and tornadoes and eruptions in volcanoes, etc. now, except that every once in a while you can read in the paper if somebody writes in talking about God's going to strike us down with tornadoes if we approve gay marriage or something of the sort.
That seems like something he'd do.
And so, so there are still people who believe that God controls the weather out there.
Right.
Which I find very strange in an age where there's so much information is available that you just have willful ignorance abounding in some of these places. Not so much among the younger people, but among the older people. And I'm one of those older people, but...
well, we're glad you're enlightened and you're with us all. I mean, Ralph has been Snapchatting me all day. It's just like, come on, Ralph, I got a job.
Okay. Well, we have about a minute to go, so we have to start wrapping things up. Get out your pen and paper.
This has been Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee.
Please send us feedback. Leave voicemail at 865-272-9060 or email us at freethoughtforum@yahoo.com.
You can see this show most Tuesdays, from 5 to 6 p.m.
Yeah, sometimes we are preempted by a beer board meeting or what have you, but most of the time we are here. And I thought we had pretty good conversation.
That was
today.
pretty good, Ralph.
It's enough material to do this 2 or 3 times again. So
sure.
Anyhow, our thanks to all the people who gave us technical assistance and to the staff at CTV KNOX.